In a small village in western Nigeria, there lived a boy named James. The village, though picturesque, bore the marks of hardship, cracked footpaths, aging huts, and children with bright eyes and empty stomachs. James's home was among the humblest of all, a tiny, one-room dwelling built from mud and thatch, with walls that crumbled during the rainy season and a roof that barely held back the elements. Inside, space was limited, and the family slept close together on woven mats, finding warmth not in wealth but in the bond they shared. James's father was a farmer, rising with the sun and working until the last light disappeared behind the hills. He cultivated a small patch of land, growing yams, cassava, and vegetables, often battling with unpredictable weather and poor soil. James's mother was equally hardworking, selling fruits and vegetables at the local market. Her earnings were modest, just enough to buy a little food, some soap, and, occasionally, fabric to patch their worn clothes. They lived from hand to mouth, never knowing what the next day might bring. Despite the hardship surrounding him, James was a spirited and intelligent boy. From a young age, he displayed an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and an unshakable determination to change his family's fate. He often sat under the shade of the old baobab tree with a tattered book in hand, his eyes filled with wonder at the world beyond the village. He dreamed of becoming someone important, someone who could lift his family from poverty and give them the life they deserved. Every morning, James would wake up before dawn, the first light of day creeping through the small cracks in the thatched roof. The rooster's crow served as his alarm, and with sleepy eyes and a determined heart, he would rise from the woven mat he shared with his siblings. The morning air was often crisp and filled with the scent of dew settling on the field outside. He started his day with chores, feeding the chickens, milking the goats, and drawing water from the nearby well. The journey to the well was no small task. It required balancing a heavy clay pot on his head as he navigated narrow, uneven paths. Yet, he did it all without complaint, knowing that each drop of water and every completed chore helped his family survive. After completing his duties, James would sling his worn-out bag over his shoulder and begin the long trek to school. The path stretched for several miles through dusty roads, thick bushes, and occasional muddy patches, especially during the rainy season. He walked barefoot, the hot earth often burning beneath his feet, but his mind was always focused on what awaited him at school. For James, each step was a step toward a better life. His school was a modest structure, just 4 classrooms with crumbling walls and a roof that leaked whenever it rained. Desks were scarce, and textbooks were shared, often passed down through generations of students. But despite its physical shortcomings, the school was James's sanctuary. It was the place where his curiosity was nurtured, his questions were welcomed, and his dreams were allowed to flourish. James loved learning. He would lose himself in stories, equations, and history lessons, always eager to absorb more. His teachers quickly noticed his dedication and hunger for knowledge. They often singled him out as a model student, offering him extra books and words of encouragement. "You're going far, James," one teacher had said. "Keep working hard. The world needs minds like yours." Their belief in him fueled his ambition. Through sleepless nights and long study sessions by the dim light of a kerosene lamp, James pressed on. His perseverance paid off when he graduated from high school with excellent grades, a proud moment for both him and his family. Tears of joy streamed down his mother's face as she held his certificate, a symbol of hope and a glimpse of a brighter future. When he received his university acceptance letter, the entire village celebrated. For James and his family, it was more than just an achievement, it was the beginning of a dream they had all carried in their hearts. University life was both exciting and challenging for James. It was a new world, unlike anything he had ever known, a place buzzing with activity, filled with young people from different walks of life, all chasing their dreams. He was deeply grateful for the opportunity to learn at such a level. Yet beneath the excitement, a heavy weight rested on his shoulders, the financial burden of staying afloat in a city far from home. His family had done all they could to help him reach this point, but their pockets were empty. There was no extra money to send, no safety net to catch him when things got tough. To survive, James quickly took on part-time jobs. In the mornings, he would attend lectures, trying to absorb as much as he could through the fatigue. In the afternoons and evenings, he worked, cleaning houses, washing cars, and selling snacks on the roadside. Sometimes, he offered to help people carry goods at the local market or swept shops just to earn a few coins. No job was too small or too difficult. He did whatever it took to pay for his textbooks, buy food, and keep a roof over his head. At night, when the city quieted down and most students rested, James sat under the flickering light of a bare bulb in his small, shared room. He would open his books, his mind tired but eager. With sleep tugging at his eyes, he pushed through chapters, solved assignments, and prepared for exams. He knew he had no choice, he had come too far to fail now. Every sleepless night, every calloused hand from labor, was a step toward a better life. Despite the hardship, James remained focused. He didn't allow his circumstances to break him. His hunger for knowledge, fueled by a desire to uplift his family, gave him strength. He began to thrive academically. Professors noticed his consistent performance and growing confidence. He asked insightful questions in class and often contributed meaningfully during group discussions. James also began to build friendships, bonds that gave him emotional support during tough times. He met other students who, like him, came from modest backgrounds. They understood his struggles and shared in his hopes. Together, they formed a study group, often meeting in the campus library to revise, share ideas, and motivate each other. Those moments, surrounded by like-minded peers, reminded James that he was not alone in his journey. Sometimes, they would talk late into the night, not just about academics, but about the future, what they wanted to become, how they would change their communities, the kinds of lives they hoped to live. James dreamed of starting his own business, one that could employ people like his parents and give back to his village. It was a dream that grew stronger with every class and every hardship he overcame. For years past, each one marked by trials, lessons, and victories. Finally, the day came when James wore his graduation gown. As he stood among hundreds of other graduates, holding his degree in business administration, he felt a wave of emotion crash over him. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof of his resilience, his sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that tomorrow could be better than today. His family traveled from the village to attend the ceremony, dressed in their finest clothes. They may not have had much, but their pride in James was immeasurable. His mother cried tears of joy as she hugged him tightly, whispering prayers of gratitude. His father, often a man of few words, simply nodded with a smile, his eyes glistening with pride. After the ceremony, they returned to his small apartment for a modest celebration. They didn't have much food or drink, but laughter and stories filled the room. For James, it was one of the happiest days of his life. He felt ready. With his degree in hand and a heart full of hope, James looked ahead to the next chapter. The road had been long and rough, but he believed the worst was behind him. He was prepared to face the world, find a job, and finally turn his dreams, and those of his family, into reality. James began his job search with boundless enthusiasm. Freshly graduated and filled with hope, He believed that all his years of sacrifice and hard work would finally pay off. With his degree in business administration clutched proudly in his hand, he typed up a polished resume, crafted carefully worded cover letters, and set out to conquer the professional world. He was confident that somewhere out there, an opportunity was waiting just for him. In the beginning, his spirits were high. He applied to as many companies as he could find, both large and small, sending out applications every day. He attended job fairs, networked with old classmates, and made countless trips to offices across the city. Dressed in his only suit, slightly worn but still respectable, he shook hands, smiled brightly, and spoke passionately about his goals. He hoped that his story of resilience and perseverance would set him apart. But as weeks turned into months, the responses he had hoped for didn't come. For every application sent, there was either silence or a polite rejection. Each "we regret to inform you" email felt like a small dagger, a blow to his spirit that slowly chipped away at his confidence. Some companies told him he lacked experience. Others didn't respond at all. The enthusiasm he once felt began to dim under the harsh weight of reality. With no money to afford public transport, James walked everywhere. Sometimes he trekked for hours in the heat, arriving at interviews sweaty and exhausted. Still, he forced a smile, straightened his clothes, and tried to present the best version of himself. But no matter how hard he tried, no job offer came. The city, once full of promise, now felt cold and unforgiving. As time dragged on, James' meager savings dwindled. He began skipping meals to stretch his money. A simple loaf of bread or a bowl of rice would have to last an entire day. The hunger gnawed at him, but he refused to let it break him. He reminded himself that many had walked this path before him and found success. He clung to the belief that his moment would come too. Eventually, with bills piling up and no source of income, James returned to doing odd jobs, the very work he thought he had left behind in his university days. He washed cars in busy neighborhoods, cleaned gutters, ran errands for neighbors, and sold phone credit on the roadside. Each task brought him a few coins, just enough to keep the lights on or buy a simple meal. Though the work was physically draining and poorly paid, James accepted it with humility. Pride had no place in the struggle for survival. Some days were particularly tough. He would come home with blistered hands and an aching back, only to fall asleep on an empty stomach. Nights were long, filled with thoughts of uncertainty and worry. Doubt began to creep in. Had he made a mistake in choosing this path? Was his dream of escaping poverty just a fantasy? But even in his darkest moments, James tried to silence the voice of despair. He had come too far to give up now. Despite the setbacks, James never let go of his ambitions. In his spare moments, he continued applying for jobs, tweaking his resume, and researching companies online. He visited internet cafes to search for openings and watched free seminars on business and entrepreneurship. He continued reading, learning, growing. He believed that as long as he kept moving, no matter how slowly, he hadn't failed. He also found comfort in small acts of kindness. A neighbor who offered him a meal, a stranger who gave him a tip for a job, or a friend who listened without judgment. These gestures reminded him that hope still existed. Though the road was long and uncertain, he held on to the dream that one day, his perseverance would lead him to the life he envisioned. And so, James pressed on. Tired but undeterred. Poor but not broken. He was a man in search of purpose, still fueled by the belief that hard work, even if unrecognized for a time, would one day speak for itself. The world had not yet given him a chance, but he wasn't done fighting for it. 15 years had passed, yet James was still struggling. The dreams that once burned brightly within him had long since dimmed beneath the weight of disappointment and survival. He had grown used to the hardship, used to waking up each day with uncertainty, to the constant hustle for odd jobs, and to the gnawing ache of unfulfilled potential. But the burden never grew lighter. It clung to him like a shadow, reminding him constantly of the life he had hoped for and the one he now endured. Over the years, James had taken on many roles: carpenter, cleaner, street vendor, gardener, and now, a handyman. He moved from one small job to another, doing whatever he could to earn a little money. His once youthful face had become worn and weathered, marked by sun, dust, and time. The sharp gleam in his eyes had dulled, but a quiet resilience still remained. James refused to give up, though every day tested that resolve. One afternoon, while working at a wealthy family's home fixing a broken fence, a moment occurred that would cut deeper than any rejection letter or missed opportunity ever had. As he adjusted a plank, his elbow accidentally knocked over a little girl's toy, a colorful, plastic unicorn that lay near the edge of the yard. The girl, no older than 13, let out a shriek. Before James could apologize, she marched up to him, her small hand raised with all the indignation a child could muster, and slapped him hard across the cheek. James froze. The slap wasn't strong, but it struck something far more tender than skin. It hit the core of his being. The girl's parents were not around. A housekeeper nearby chuckled awkwardly but said nothing. The girl glared at him, then stormed away, her toy forgotten in the grass. James stood in stunned silence, his hand on his cheek, his tools forgotten. In that moment, he wasn't a man with a degree, or someone who had fought tooth and nail to rise from poverty. He was just a man, a tired, aging man being slapped by a child because the world had reduced him to someone invisible, someone without power, without dignity. He finished the job in silence, head bowed. The sun felt too hot, the air too heavy. That evening, he returned to his small, one-room apartment, still not too different from the house he grew up in, just less love in the walls. He didn't eat. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, the image of the slap looping in his mind like a cruel echo. Tears came slowly at first, then in heavy, painful sobs. It wasn't just the slap, it was everything it represented. The years he had fought, the dreams he had sacrificed, the life he had imagined but never lived. He cried for the boy he had once been, full of hope, standing barefoot in a schoolyard with stars in his eyes. He cried for his parents, now aging and frail, still toiling for survival in the village he had tried to save them from. He cried for the man he had become, hardened, tired, and invisible in a world that cared little for his story. That night, James did not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of years pressing down on him. Every failure, every insult, every door that had been closed in his face, they all came rushing back. He wondered what had gone wrong. He had done everything he was told, studied hard, worked tirelessly, remained honest. Wasn't that supposed to be enough? The next morning, James woke up with a heart as heavy as lead. His eyes were swollen from crying, but something deeper, older, gnawed at his spirit. A voice within him whispered that he had reached the edge. If something didn't change, he would break. He knew what he had to do. Word had long circulated through the village and beyond about a native doctor who lived deep in the forest, a man said to possess ancient knowledge and mystical powers. People claimed he could see the future, bend fate, and even unlock riches, if the seeker was brave enough to pay the price. James wasn't one to chase superstition. He believed in hard work, education, and perseverance. But today, something had shifted. Desperation had a way of turning reason into a whisper. So he packed a small bag and began the long walk toward the healer's compound, heart pounding with each step. When he arrived, the native doctor, a wiry man wrapped in animal skins and beads, was seated under a tree, grinding herbs with a wooden pestle. His eyes, clouded with age, seemed to look straight through James. "You've come a long way," the native doctor said without looking up. "And not just in distance." James was startled. "Yes. I need help." The doctor gestured for him to sit. "Tell me everything." And so, James did. He spoke of his childhood dreams, his struggles in school, the jobs that paid too little, the slap that broke something inside him. As he spoke, his voice cracked under the weight of years. The native doctor said nothing, just listened, truly listened. When James finished, silence filled the air like thick fog. Finally, the native doctor asked, "What can I do for you?" James hesitated for a moment, then answered with trembling honesty, "I want to be rich. I'm tired of suffering. I want to take care of my family. I want to live without fear." The native doctor chuckled softly. It wasn't mocking, it was something deeper, older. A laugh that knew things James did not. "You want riches?" the native doctor repeated, his voice like wind rustling through ancient trees. "Do you even know what kind of riches you seek?" James blinked. "What do you mean?" The native doctor leaned forward. "There is wealth of the pocket, and wealth of the spirit. Which one are you truly searching for?" James, after a pause, said, "Both. I want peace and prosperity. I want to live, not just survive." The doctor nodded slowly. "A wise answer. But you must understand, everything comes with a price. Even blessings." James leaned in. "I'm ready." The native doctor leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to echo through the still air. "If you want my help," he said slowly, "you must celebrate your birthday with all your friends. Make sure the food and drinks come from your own hard-earned money." Then, from beneath a fold in his robe, he pulled out a small vial filled with a strange, shimmering liquid that seemed to swirl even when still. He held it out to James. "Add this to the food before serving it. Only then will the path to your desires open." James stared at the vial in his palm. It felt cold and unnerving. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The native doctor's expression did not change. "It is your doorway. Do not ask questions you are not ready to understand. If you wish to live a different life, this is the price." Confusion and dread warred within James. His instinct screamed against it, but desperation clutched tighter. He thought of his mother's thinning frame, his father's aching back, the countless nights he had gone to bed hungry, dreams buried under a blanket of hopelessness. He nodded. "I'll do it." The native doctor gave a single approving nod and turned away without another word, vanishing into the shadows of his compound. Over the next few days, James threw himself into preparations. He reached out to friends he hadn't seen in years, people who had stood by him during school, others who had shared the struggles of job hunting and poverty. Many were surprised to hear from him, but they welcomed the invitation warmly. James told them he wanted to celebrate life despite his circumstances, that even without much, he still had gratitude to share. Every coin he earned from his odd jobs went into the party. He bought food, bags of rice, bottles of drinks, meat, spices, and spent hours cooking in a borrowed pot over a fire behind his tiny apartment. His hands trembled when he finally uncorked the vial. The liquid glowed faintly. He hesitated, heart pounding, then poured it into the stew and stirred. As the day drew near, James felt a strange mix of emotions. Excitement buzzed through him as he imagined the smiles, the laughter, the sound of music filling his home. But dread coiled like a snake in his stomach. What if the native doctor tricked me? What if this wasn't the path to prosperity, but to ruin? Still, he pushed those thoughts aside. He had made his choice. And now, there was no turning back.